episode is made possible by OIT VoIP. Find your best-in-class revenue generation for MSPs all over the world. Learn more via the link in the show notes.
Welcome to MSP Dispatch, the live show, 7/17/2024. I'm your host, Tom Lawrence, and we have a few stories because it's been a while. We're going to try to get through all of these in a half hour, but there's a lot that happened over the last several weeks since I last did the live show. So, there's a few topics I want to kind of poke at and cover and have some comments about. I think the first one we're going to bring up here is the polyfill.io, the biggest thing you never heard of. But yeah, definitely quite scary here. And the whole problem with polyfill, and matter of fact, hold on, we're going to switch how we're doing this really quick here. Go ahead and authorize my share so I can do the scrolling. So, little detail he didn't set. All right, we're good. We're good now. The internet exploded this week about polyfill.io. This is actually the internet exploded a few weeks ago. Now, what's really interesting about this, now this was posted on June 30th. So this does have like a few weeks of us trying to sort things out and add into what actually happened with polyfill. So first, what is polyfill and why does it matter? So polyfill is a way to build browser compatibility. I hope all of the listeners here have their browser up to date and you're not waiting on a little update button in the corner, or they have a browser so old it doesn't auto update. Polyfill is a system by which you can take a website and you pull polyfill.io into your site, and then it will allow you to bring up that older browser's compatibility to match with your site. Obviously, this makes it really popular, but the actual fill that was being used is by a company that, well, let's just say is not trusted. So developers built this polyfill to fill that gap for what this does. And let's go over here to who bought it, because that's the part that really matters. It was owned by a third-party company doing CDN that was pretty nefarious, essentially. Where do they go here? Browsers, cross-scripting. I'm trying to find the name of the company that's in here, but it was a Chinese company. What they started doing was randomly injecting, instead of the normal polyfill stuff, they would inject some malware into there. And that's where this whole thing kind of goes sideways. Now, the real interesting part about all this is how many companies were using it. So it's not just that it's some company injected some malware, but maybe it was only used by a few companies. And the good news is I don't think the people running polyfill, I mean, they know, but didn't go as far as they could in terms of attacks. They were only really specifically, that we can prove at least, attacking certain mobile devices at certain times. Where this gets really crazy is certain mobile devices at certain times is bad, but they were also in Okta. That's the part that really got me. Okta was using this as well. And if you're not familiar, Okta is a big identity provider. It is used a lot in the IT and MSP space. And Okta was pulling from polyfill. Now, they've since fixed all this, so they're not. And it almost makes you wonder if there was a time they targeted Okta, like they had this in their back pocket, because was this, nation state level sponsorship because they were so targeted in their attacks? That's what made it so hard to find out about this problem. But it's just one of those things, like, this was at least found now, but it could have been found far later with all these different companies using it, and it could have been found through something like an Okta breach. So I really look at this whole polyfill thing as another internet dodging a bullet, if you will, of really bad things that could have happened, or really targeted attacks. It would have been kind of mysterious, because once you get into the browser, especially let's say something like Okta, if that would have allowed someone to bypass or get the tokens essentially and be able to impersonate people with their identity provider, that is the ultimate goal you want for stealing someone's identity. And of course, Okta then privileged access management for all the other tools that many enterprises uses, and no one would know where this is coming from. You would suddenly get someone compromised, but you wouldn't realize it was a polyfill.io injection that happened on a Okta website where you logged in, because Okta's pulling from a third party. So this whole thing is just a mess to think these large companies, by the way, several banks, many banks, I should say, not several, of the larger banks were all using this as well. So who knows where this could have gone? We're happy to have found it now. And I feel like we dodged a bullet by not getting it. It wasn't a bigger story, because think about how, from a cybersecurity standpoint, how you unravel where that came from. That is the part that really got me on there, was just how crazy that whole thing was. Now, moving on over to something that I like to follow up on. The attack's over, and it's it's time to clean up the mess and figure out how much the mess cost. Now, the cleanup is still kind of ongoing from United Health talks, from the United Health Group and their hack. Second quarter earnings beat analysts' expectations at United Health, which actually is kind of surprising. How do they have earnings that good after a giant cybersecurity attack? But hey, that's part of the power of being this large company, and they don't really have it a choice. They're kind of a monopoly over a lot of markets. But the company now expects the cyber attacks could cost 2.45 billion for the year, including more direct expenses for financial support for healthcare providers and consumer notifications that will begin later this month. It's got to cost money somewhere down the line to provide us another redundant level of checking, because our personal data was lost from United Health. I don't even know what these companies do anymore. I've gotten so many letters over the years, from the days of Equifax all the way to today of, oh, good, we're going to provide you credit monitoring. Well, great. I have like unlimited credit monitoring for all the companies that are breached every single week. And, but thinking about this, I mean, $2.45 billion. And all of this stems from one unprotected Citrix server. That's it. One server. That was the pivot in there. No 2FA on it. Old credentials that hadn't been rolled in a long time. You're talking about two really basic things. Someone's old credentials with a non-protected 2FA server that was going to be decommissioned at some point. That was kind of the answer. It was an acquisition. And I don't really like that as an excuse, because I did actually take the time to watch some of the congressional testimony, because because the government had to get involved and bail them out a little bit. There was the usual parade, if you will, the dog and pony show of, we take some executive, put them in a seat, and have old people in the Senate and old Congress people and Senate people point the finger and do some hand waving, saying, well, you should do better. And you read the testimony, you're like, or watch any of it, I should say, you find out that it was just an old Citrix server by acquisition. I'm like, well, if you acquired an old Citrix server that you were going to decommission, why did you bring it into the rest of the domain and allow it to be access to be pivoted? Obviously, there's technical details that I'm missing in here. My favorite detail from that testimony, of course, was someone holding the Dummies for Hacking book. One of the senators holding that made me really happy. It just kind of like put the icing on the cake of that. But that's a lot of money being spent on that. And hopefully this, teaches them a lesson to deal a little better with security, because there are real lives at stake when any of these healthcare companies are attacked. It's definitely super, super scary. Now, this brings me back to my old days, and we're going to talk about the RIA and the copyright things. Oh, yes. It just makes me think of Napster, because anytime you talk about the lawsuits around everything that RIA is doing, and they're now attacking Verizon, which Verizon's not my favorite company, but RIA is not in the right here. They're trying to find some end run around this. They want to kick you off the internet, basically. The problem is, the huge problem, and this is what came out of all those lawsuits from the music industry, was every time they thought they had someone's IP address and blamed them, they frequently found out they were wrong. They had very inaccurate data. Whatever methods they were using for gathering said data, the major record labels just failed to prove a case, and so much of that got thrown out. It was just, a number of years ago, but they're back at it again. They're just not ready to let go. And the current thing they want to do is get you off the internet for having pirated music. Like, they just can't let go of it. And this is really interesting to me, because it really, and this is one reason I love Tech Dirt so much. They cover all the different laws that they're essentially going up against, trying to circumvent, and making a mess of. And it is just driving me bananas watching them. Like, why can't they go away? We kind of need someone more rational to say, stop all this, like a countersuit to to kind of put it to bed. Like, look, you're just not going to do it. This is what their legal letter says here. The scope of repeat infringement on Verizon's network is staggering. Thousands of Verizon subscribers were subject to 20 or more notices from plaintiffs. So basically, they're trying to, pass the buck along, going, hey, Verizon, your users stole our music, and we just won't let this go. And yeah, the case is still ongoing. I don't think they are going to win here. I really hope they don't, because this will just make a bigger mess, especially for all those that are caught up in the metadata that is just wrong for all of it. Because, the implications aside of just trying to get someone off the internet because they pirated a song, allegedly pirated a song, having a whole bad data set that you're using to prosecute someone, now you're ruining people's lives, making it expensive for data that you don't even have any accuracy or a history of accuracy for. So I thought it was interesting, problem. It's kind of a side note for those of you that work in the IT MSP space. This has become a problem where people don't like providing guest networks because of the potential problems of piracy that come along. And I've actually suggested that their guest network be routed out through a privacy VPN, because that's how you avoid things as a company that says, I'd like to offer a guest network to be nice and give Wi-Fi to people, because that seems like a kind thing to do. But of course then you're tackled with all the legal problems that may come if they use your IP address. So privacy VPNs at the router level are great ways to provide guest networks that will keep you out of, well, the real lawsuits that are apparently still flying here in 2024. Moving on to Wiz. I really like, over the years, some of the things that Wiz has done. So a little bit of history about Wiz. Wiz was formed by some former Google cloud builders, if you will. And Google is looking to acquire them, is why they're in the news again. But Wiz is just an interesting security company. Google's purchase of Mandiant is cool, and I think it's really interesting to add Wiz on top of here, because they know the Azure cloud system really, really well. Wiz has had a wonderful history of getting involved and poking at the Azure cloud system and finding the holes. In reality is, when you're staffed with people who built the Azure system, you know where the bodies are buried. You know where your product manager told you to go so far and then stop. As Microsoft is a company full of really, really talented people in the engineering side. They are brilliant, but they are then restrained by product managers that only let them make the product so good or so secure before they send them off on another errand to do another thing. And so Wiz really had a good go of it in terms of building credibility. Did a lot of great things in terms of security, really, really good write-ups. And I think that's part of why Google wants to acquire them. So it's kind of wild to me to think that they're worth $23 billion, a company that's only a few years old. But hey, it's is what it is. And the uh, Google collecting these security vendors. So with Mandiant, Wiz on board, and of course you have all the Google Project Zero stuff and everything else. It's really interesting seeing Google kind of go, hey, we're the search company, but we're using this extra revenue to become a security company. And in terms of like their purchase of Mandiant, it's great because the Mandiant write-ups, which I have another story I'll reference shortly on that, are still just as good as ever. They still are a top-notch security team. And I think they will probably be a good steward of Wiz. It's not like the other products that we think Google's just going to let languish. The security side seems to be the part of Google that they get right. They have done a great job. And part of it's because, and Google released a little documentary on this of some of the history of security. I thought it was a really fun thing to watch. And they got hit early with some of the attacks, and they took a really strong security posture early days of internet, essentially years and years ago. And if you notice, Google's not been in the news for egregious security problems. Now, killing products, oh yeah. Privacy issues, oh yeah, they're that too. Really bad search results, definitely there. Google's definitely screwed up on all the other fronts, but security at least is the one thing Google seems to be getting right. And acquiring more security companies, hey, I'm here for it. I think it's going to be, well, I prefer companies be independent, but if Google's going to acquire something security, I'd like to see like all these security companies remain independent, but that's a whole different topic and out of scope for today. A now patched security flaw in Veeam. Let's go over there. It's speaking once again right on that security topic. New ransomware group exploiting Veeam backup software vulnerability. And before you panic, because I know many of you, including us at CNWR, are Veeam users, this is CVE 2023. So all of us that are up on top of our game have patched it, and those who are not are, well, the subject of this news article. So there's a lot of attacks on this. This is on the CISA list, and I believe the CISA Kev list, like you got to patch this. They know Veeam is well used in the enterprise market. It's used in the MSP market. It's probably one of the most popular backup softwares out there. There's like any software bugs in it, but there's patches, and those patches were known. We've got a CV 2023. It was April 2024. So we're a year and a few months past when this patch was released, and you should have it patched by now. But here we are talking about it because people don't patch. So we have the whole attack chain, initial access, persistence, etc., and they're exploiting this particular vulnerability. And of course, exploiting vulnerabilities and backups means it's going to be a bigger mess to clean up. So if you have any of these out there, and there's been some more recent stuff with Veeam where there's a few different bugs that have been found. So if you're there patching this one, patch all the latest ones as well. Time to get on top of that. It kind of drives me nuts when I see all these things that are like so old, but still here being poked at. All right, next one. I think this is kind of interesting when it's that, you know what spreadsheets needs? LLMs. Great article here from the Register. And researchers at Microsoft have developed a framework designed to make it easier for large language models to analyze contents of spreadsheets and perform data management and analysis tests, because why not? Actually, watching general users over the years, in my earliest days of tech, about 20 plus, well, no, 25 years ago, I remember meeting Bob, and Bob would use a calculator, like one of those calculators with the little numbers, the small printer on it, you know, because it's 25 years ago. While he used Excel, he would add up columns by typing in all the numbers and things like that. And over the years, end users have become better over the last 20 years. But anyone who works in tech and looked over the shoulder of people putting things in spreadsheets realizes, if I had the time, I would show you how to, sum a column. And I think a lot of them can probably sum a column now, but there's a lot of advanced stuff that you don't necessarily feel like doing. And I hope, and I think this might be an interesting one where you could have a use of AI going, hey, help this person, because I don't have time to help them summarize things and put things into a better context and get better at spreadsheets. So this could be something actually useful, I hope, that they've developed it, because what they're doing is, it's not that we don't already have Microsoft cramming all kinds of LLM stuff down our throat on us. It's that we actually have something more practical where they built a better model to pull that data out of the spreadsheets. That's what's specifically about this. So I think that's actually an interesting one. It's certainly much better than their Copilot ideas and all the data privacy concerns that came with that. Now we'll move on to TP-Link, because I see these pop up a little bit more than I'd like, so to speak, in the business world. And I pointed this out before. So TP-Link Omada, for those not familiar, probably you have heard of a company called Ubiquiti and the Unify line. So the Unify line is a system by which you can self-host the controller, and it's pretty robust system. It's been around for a while. The product's become substantially more mature. I know it's quite popular. Ubiquiti has a bug bounty program, but then TP-Link Omada basically copied it. I mean, when I did the review of this, I was like, wow, they copied it. They copied the interface. They copied the design. They copied the way you adopt the devices into the networking. The problem is, over the years since they've released it, they seem to be terrible at security, but there's not a lot of people poking at it. So the folks at Talos goes, hey, it seems like a lot of people are deploying this. Now, I have a hard time understanding the use case for this, because TP-Link Omada is cheaper, but like 10% cheaper than Ubiquiti, the company that's been quite on top of security over the last few years. But there's quite a few CVEs they found here. Good news is, at least they were responsive. They worked with the vendor to find patches. But boy, there's a lot of vulnerabilities that just one after another. And I obviously these have existed. I just think it's took a while before the TP-Link, because even my review was from several years ago. I always told people I was really iffy on their security because, well, TP-Link has been really iffy on other products they make about security. TP-Link is that company that doesn't necessarily build the product new. They look at products in the market and they copy a company and try to get like, hey, we're going to be 10% cheaper. Do you have the same security or anything like that? And like, well, no, we're just 10% cheaper, maybe 15% and 20% to get into the initial markets, and we'll raise them up over time. So nothing about TP-Link made me think they're secure. And well, after the folks over at Talos took a poke at them, they're not secure, but at least they were responsive, and he did do some of the updates for things. Moving on to just a quick note that I thought was interesting. Microsoft finally decided to do something a little bit different. They actually made a repairable Surface laptop. So from 0 to 10 to 8 out of 10. That is a dramatic increase. And of course, the bar was really low. Any increase was an increase. But the Surface ones that you had to cut the fabric out and everything else was the early days, but these are actually serviceable to an extent. Not perfect, but 8 out of 10 at iFixit. So yeah, the new models coming out actually have some serviceability. My real question is, how are they at running Linux? Because now if they're serviceable, will they run Linux? That's where my interest lies on there. But hey, for those of you looking for laptops that are a little better, hey, pretty cool that Microsoft's getting a little better on things. Now to talk about this disaster, which is the CDK. Oh man, I'm happy this is over. It looks like in this fiasco started several weeks ago, shutting down the dealer networks, about 15,000 of them. Now, 15,000 actually describes the majority of the dealer networks in the United States. So this particular company, CDK Global, is a conglomerate run by private equity that probably doesn't care much about security based on the incident that happened, how long it took them to recover, and all reports point to them paying out a lot in ransomware fees. I've heard the number 25 million. CDK has been quiet. We'll have to wait, till they file to find out just how much they shelled out to the ransomware operators. But this is just a big mess. Like the dealerships are completely we're at a standstill this. And the part that was kind of surprising me, I didn't see mentioned in this article or even really any of the follow-up articles. The one problem I have is here in Michigan where I live, and I imagine this is very similar in other states, we call it the Secretary of State. The dealership network system actually allows, and CDK has authorization this to do vehicle registrations automatically. So when you buy your car at the dealership, it's automatically applied to you. Obviously, if the hackers were in the network, they have access to the DMV or Secretary of State, depending on how your state does it, for each one that CDK had access to, which I imagine is probably all 50 states. So what concerns are there? What if they could print different things or just cause different levels of chaos? What does that access look like? And I didn't really see anyone talking about it, but I think it's a pretty big concern. And I probably because there's not a lot of information on it, because CDK is like the one biggest company they use, and you're talking about interfacing with government systems, and that's probably not the most well documented process that's known by a small number of companies. But it's still one of those things that makes you wonder, like, what, cool, we solved the CDK problem, they're back up and running, dealerships are back putting things back together and getting things back on track. But what does it mean for some of the other stuff kind of downstream? Like, was that exposed? Were API keys rolled? I've kind of been wondering about that. I'm kind of hoping we get a good debrief on this sometime in the future. Now moving on to something that is just absolutely crazy here. And I'm doing this a little bit backwards because we're talking about what happened here on July 10th, but I'm going to go backwards to the Mandiant one because, well, we can do it that way. Snowflake lets admins make MFA mandatory across all user accounts. This is one of those things. So company announces intent following Ticketmaster, Santander, but there's a ton of companies that all got breach related to Snowflake. Now, I've heard people, and sorry, maybe I'm just not understanding it. I've heard people said, I think Snowflake was part of the attack. Like they thought Snowflake had as a security flaw because people say it doesn't make sense that this many companies didn't have 2FA. And I'm like, I've worked in cybersecurity long enough. This many companies don't have 2FA. I feel confident about this, that every one of these attacks was kind of the same. So a month after the incident, Mandiant Giant suggested the litany of data thefts linked to Snowflake account intrusions had the common component of lacking multi-factor authentication controls. The cloud storage and data analytics company is offering MFA option to admins. Now, one of those conversations that occur at these companies are like, we should make MFA an absolute must. There's some security person in the room saying this is what should be done here. And then there's the product team going, we don't want to make it hard to sign up for our service. We don't want to force people to do this. But then there should have been a point at which they got big and they had clients like Ticketmaster, and they should say, like, we should probably tell them they should turn to 2FA on. I'm like, yeah, but we don't want to upset our customers. I mean, they might switch their entire infrastructure to go somewhere else if we told them to use 2FA, which obviously companies don't up and switch infrastructure that easy. Snowflake, I feel, is slightly culpable by the fact they made it optional. I don't think it should have been optional. At least it wasn't an upsell. It was just an option, because some companies think security is an upsell, but that's a different topic. But this is just one of those messes that has occurred where all these different companies that are all downstream because someone built an automated way to go through all the Snowflake accounts through all the credentials they had, and anyone who didn't have 2FA, they were able to get in, they were able to pull data. And when they found the juicy stuff like Ticketmaster in there, well, that's where things turned into the big mess. Now, the next one we can talk about here, and I think this is really good write up from Talos on this, and it's back to the Snowflake here. Snowflake isn't an outlier, it's the canary in the coal mine, because Snowflake's not the only company holding a lot of large companies' data that doesn't have 2FA turned on. And info stealer logs are a gold mine. It just people consolidating the data. Matter of fact, there's a series of these different Telegram groups that are out there that just are a stream of credentials out there. There's sample credentials that are real and work, but they then lead you to selling larger credentials and people selling just massive collections of all of these info stealer collections. And people start sorting through them, and parsing tools get used. And like I said, Snowflake was one someone took the time to write an automation for to go grab things out here. But yeah, this is just a canary in a coal mine. This is a shot across the bow here. Snowflake is one in the news today. Who's in the news tomorrow? We don't know, but it's a good article to read here, the whole Talos perspective on it. And of course, the do check out the Mandiant write up on it as well, because it's kind of the same answer. There's a link in the register one to the Mandiant write up on there. It's the same problem. Just pain. And speaking of pain, we haven't had pain like this in the Linux world in a while. I've always joked, if we ever found, and this is not as major yet, but if we ever had an egregious flaw found in SSH, it'll be like a bad day for the internet. A lot of things just won't work because we haven't had a flaw this bad in a while. Now, good news is this bad is still really not that bad. Hair's not on fire here. Definitely patch it, but hair not on fire. One of the things I want to point out here is this really is a flaw that's called regression. I actually love the write-up because it's, old school looking here. We got a nice text write-up and everything else, and all the details of what the security researcher did to find this. And essentially, this is a regression bug. Matter of fact, the last big bug we had in SSH was in 2006. And this is a revisiting of that bug. This bug was fixed, but some code was introduced that brought this bug back to the surface. Now, since 2006, so in the last 18 years, there's actually a lot of hardening that's been done that protect us from things like this, not just in the code, but the address space layout randomization. That is what protects this from actually being a majorly exploitable bug. So the ASLR system in here and makes this bug really hard to exploit. So in particular, ASLRs are talked about here, and that's why this bug was first figured out how to exploit on i386 systems, because with your i386, not your AMD 64 compilations, you have a much smaller address space to do the randomization. So for those of you not familiar with ASLR, every time the system boots, it doesn't put things that you're looking for. In this particular case, you're looking for where glibc is, because that's where they're going to be able to pivot the exploit and find a path to execution. It's somewhere random every time the system reboots. So you can make it a little bit harder for someone to exploit this. With the larger memory space available and the better hardening ASLR offers our AMD 64, that's even harder to do. So they haven't been able to get this attack to do that. Even with the way this attack works, they're talking about taking 10,000 tries to trigger this race condition, and 1 week on average with how many connections do they have here? Yeah, having 10 simultaneous connections on a low latency network, waiting 600 seconds, giving you about a week average to obtain a remote root shell. And they went through each version because some of these, it actually takes even longer because of the inconsistencies of things. So there's so much good stuff to dive into in here in terms of, like, if you want to understand some of the security and mitigations that we have around these things that protect us from it. But it's still kind of one of those, once again, interesting. People got really confident that SSH was wonderful and great until it's not. And this is why I still don't recommend exposing it. And yes, you just exposing SSH, not whether or not you had keys enabled or not, whether or not you've disabled password login, just exposing SSH is what was needed to get this exploited. That's an important aspect to think about. Just the SSH exposure was enough. And good thing it's patched, and we're moving on from that. Now getting over here to the next topic. Telos again. Impact of data breaches is fueling scam campaigns. Uh, this is this is a lot. Where do all these people get scammed from? Data breaches have become one of the most crucial threats to organizations across the globe. They've only become more prevalent and serious over time. A data breach occurs when unauthorized individuals gain access to sensitive, protected, and confidential data. This stolen data can include personal information, financial records, intellectual property, etc. Active scam team is likely to be stolen data. It is so much data out there from all these companies being breached. They know so much more about us that they can really start tailoring all these phishing emails to get really, really good at what they do. And this isn't just attacking companies. This is doing a massive amount of attacking companies or attacking individuals and people. When they attack the people, a lot of times because of the types of scams they get into, they refer to it as pig butchering scams. Look them up. It's really scary. And it's really reached an interesting point in terms of numbers where some of these are done. I've heard people say it's now become a part of, I believe the Philippines is an extremely popular place for these to be originated from, and it's become part of their economy. And that blows my mind. That is, that it's a measurable part of their GDP, which of course, once that happens, the government always willing to look the other way and not be as involved in actively doing something about it because they're like, well, that kind of brings in a few the 100 million something dollars for us. So they become that much more challenging and difficult to deal with. But these data breaches are really adding up to pretty massive campaigns that's really, nailing down to individuals. So something to put on people's radar there and make sure people are aware from an individual's basis. Last article I have here is Outlook. This is just showing that Microsoft just kind of lollygags along fixing things. Microsoft has finally fixed a known Outlook issue confirmed in February. Yes, we talked about this in July, which was triggering incorrect security alerts after installing the December security updates, which of course they ended up rolling back. Now they actually had a false start again in here, and this is why us as MSPs always pull our hair out of roll it forward, roll that patch back, roll it forward, roll that patch back, because it's a back and forth issue. So Redmond issued a fix in April, then rolled it back after shipping it to Office users in the beta channel. Good news is that only the beta channel people were affected, but yeah, it's finally getting around to fixing some of these false positives in here. So I thought that was, at least Microsoft's getting around to fixing things. Now, I didn't include in here the AT&T breach. I figure everyone's heard enough about it. And outside of that just being its own disaster, hey, I don't need to really add. There are some other stories here on MSP Network where that was talked about a little bit more in depth. So I didn't include that. But what I will include, what I will leave you with, and I thought this was fun. And we have two things here. First, someone made a site called Taconomical, and I thought that was cool. And Taconomical lets you I just want to leave something. It's lunchtime for a lot of people maybe watching this. This lets you find out the price of tacos in different places. They use a scraping tool, and it lets you figure out how much the Dorito Locos combo is in different areas. So you can see it's only $8 here. But if you're in Hillsdale here, you're going to pay $9.99 for it. Wow, Des Moines, they're charging $9.99 there. But if you're just go a little over here, you can find that you can save about 50 cents on your tacos. Let's go a little further though, because someone copied this. And for those of you going, Tom, I don't like Taco Bell. I like Chipotle. So someone made the same thing for Chipotle. I'm kind of here for this. All these companies making these different tools that do some live scraping so you can find the cheapest tacos or burritos or Chipotle you want. This is fun. This is something I wanted to leave everyone with because, why not? Feeling hungry? Go ahead and find the cheapest place for the tacos, or just participate in the data science that's involved in this. There's actually write-ups for the people who did this. These are some open source projects. They use some scraping tools. It's kind of a fun dive into it because you can take this knowledge and maybe apply it to something else you want to know the pricing of, and go ahead and put together your own system for it. Because this is how the Chipotle one. There's actually numerous ones of these if you find them. I kind of was engaging with people on Reddit on this, and it just kind of tickled my fancy here, and I thought it might tickle yours too. So looking for some cheap tacos. But that's it for the show today. thank you everyone for joining. Thanks everyone for leaving some comments. Head over to the MSP Media Network, join the Discord, ask some questions, tag me or anyone there to have a more engaging conversation, and leave your thoughts down below to all this. And thank you.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.